Module 2, Purposes for Assessment. People most often use language assessments to collect two kinds of data. One is connected with the learning of languages, with the assessing the degree of progress toward the learning goal. These purposes are important in school and other educational settings, and so the assessments used to collect data come under the heading of educational assessments. Educational language assessments usually takes place within language programs. The procedures are usually based on content that has been or will be taught, are frequently developed and carried out by the teachers, and can often be flexible, allowing for the use of observational techniques, watching and recordings what learners do, portfolios, collections of their works, self-assessment, learning or learners making judgment about their own abilities, and informational tests or quizzes, as well as formal tests administered under more strictly controlled conditions. The second kind of information is connected with whether or not a person's language ability is adequate to satisfy some predetermined need or standard. This is known as proficiency assessment. The assessment of language proficiency is usually connected to the language and related skills that are needed to carry out a job, study an academic subject, or fulfill other kinds of role. Because the focus is not on what the assessee has been taught, this kind of assessment is less likely to be carried out by the teachers and more likely to involve formal tests administered under controlled, uniform, standardized, conditions and produced by national or international agencies. Proficiency assessment are distinct formal educational assessments because they do not center on learning process or the outcomes of the particular course of study. Proficiency assessment are connected with a person's current functionality rather than with their learning, what the assessee can accomplish through their use of language now, not how they reach this point, or how long it might take them to arrive at a higher level of ability. In proficiency assessment, the issue is whether or not person being assessed has sufficient language ability to satisfy certain needs. Proficiency assessments are often used to gatekeeping decisions, immigration's access to employment and educational opportunities. These may relate to a relative specific purpose, such as using the language in leading groups of tourists around city, working as a dentist, steering ships in international water, or studying marketing at a university. Or it may be for less specialized or less clearly definable general purposes that might apply to a very wide range of language users. Tasks that male language users might need to carry out at some point might include reserving a room in a hotel or guest house, filling in forms with basic personal information, buying food, following television news programs, reading articles in popularized magazines, or holding conversations about personal experiences. Now, let's go to educational assessment in teaching and learning. Assessment can take place at different stages during the learning processes. Before they begin a course in a new language, we may be interested in the learner's aptitude for language learning, their potential to learn. Although we know that almost anyone can learn a foreign language given the time and motivation, some people may be predisposed to make faster progress than others. A coach looking for someone with the potential to be good at basketball player may try to find someone who is tall and able to jump high with quick reactions, good coordinations, and competitive spirits. In the same way, some selective language training programs, such as those organized by the military, need to pick from a large group of applicants, those with the greatest potentials to learn language quickly. The Pimsleur Language Aptitude Battery, Pimsleur 2004, for example, set out identity as a potential language learners individuals with a good memory of word shapes and sounds, who are good at discriminating between similar sounds, good at identifying grammatical patterns, and who have an interest in other cultures. Partly because motivation is now widely regarded as more important than aptitude in shaping language learning success, and partly because most language courses cater for learners who already have some knowledge of language. Aptitude tests are not as widely used as they used to be. It is more often the case that course providers wish to find out how much of the content of the course language learners already know before they begin, or how much they have learned in the end. In this case, assessment may be prognostic, looking forward to the content planned for the course and deciding priorities, or concerned with achievement, looking back to what learners have been taught to find out how much they have absorbed and what might need to be covered again. Aptitude and prognostic assessments are used to inform selection decision, deciding which learners might require language course, or choosing those most likely to succeed. They may also be used to inform placement decisions about which of the available classes best matches learners' need. During a course achievements assessments, as progress tests might be used to gauge the ongoing improvement made by the learners at the end of course. They are often used in making past or failed decisions or in signing grades. In using achievements assessments, the teacher may be interested in obtaining detailed diagnostic information about which parts of the material the learners have taken, in which part will need more work. In assessing learning, a distinction is often made between more formative uses of assessment that immediately guide what teachers and learners will do next, and more summative uses, which focus on a retrospective picture of what has been learned. Another way of expressing this distinction is to call the former assessment for learning and to contrast this with assessment of learning. An example of the use formative and diagnostic assessment would be a teacher observing that some students are having difficulty in this distinguishing between for and since when talking about time. In the English teacher might decide to intervene by asking questions and providing examples to help build their understanding of the distinction. This kind of assessment informs learning because teachers are able to adjust the content of her class to take account of the student's performance. The focus is on what should happen next in the classroom to bring out learning. An example of a more summative assessment would be an end-of-year test based on the topics taught during the year. The test audits learning by providing evidence of what the students have learned and how will they have met course objectives. The focus is on finding out on what have much learning has happened. Like the formative assessment described above, such tests might include questions dealing with specific points of grammar, such as for or since, distinction found in the diagnostic test, but the result may not be available until the year has finished and there is no immediate opportunity to work on improving performance as all students have left. In this case, the result might be used for program evaluation or judgment about the effectiveness of the language course rather than the abilities of individual learners. Gaining an awareness of how well the learners are progressing is, of course, easiest when the learners are involved and interested in the process and share their insight with their teacher. Good learners set themselves targets, things about how best to learn, and often reflect on their own progress towards their goal. Self-assessment and peer assessment. Learners assess their own each other's performance have emerged as powerful means in engaging learning in this process and helping them to take more control of their own learning. Of course, teaching can become more challenging when the learners do not want to learn or are unwilling to communicate. This brings us to another reason for using assessment motivating learners, because assessments are often associated with rewards, access to opportunities such as course or jobs, prizes, certificates, grades, praise, and attention from the teacher. They can serve as a powerful motivation for learners. However, using assessment in this way is risky and potentially very damaging. In some cases, it can actually have a negative effect on the learner's motivation. The learners who repeatedly fails to gain good grades or pass tests will sooner or later become frustrated, conclude that language learning is not worth the effort, and give up even trying to learn. Formative diagnostic assessment by providing helpful feedback promises to guide learners in their studies. However, for many learners, especially those in formal schooling, successes on tests especially major proficiency tests may come to seem more important than successful communication in the language they are learning. Where this happens, the content of the test can take over from the official curriculum, and learning goals that are not covered on the test may get pushed aside and ignored. Teachers may teach and students may try to learn only the material that they think will be assessed. The changes in teaching and learning that may come about in response to an upcoming test are known as washback, and this has emerged as an important area of language assessment research. Feedback and washback are discussed in more detail in Module 4. Educational assessment, on the other hand, and proficiency assessment, on the other, are often seen as distinct, even in comparable areas of specialization conducted by different people employing different techniques, informed by different theories, and embracing different values. For this reason, they are often treated separately, and the relationship between them ranges from mutual indifference to sometimes heated conflict. This conflict is most often played in the field of summative assessments, where the role of the teacher as the facilitator of learning comes up against the need of or to account for what has been learned in terms of general standards set by the employers, government, or external agencies. The rules of summative assessment and the proficiency assessments. Although the difference between the teachers do in the classroom and large scale testing the important, there is also a good deal in common between them. To be effective, both depend all on well crafted questions or other techniques that will provide useful evidence of learners' abilities. Task types used in the large scale test can be adapted for use in the classroom, while innovative ideas first tried out in class can find their way to more formal assessments. Both classroom assessments and large scale tests can be improved by careful critical review and through experience the result from an assessment on one. Perhaps the strongest argument for treating assessments in the classroom and in the examination hall in the same book is that in a classroom and the examination hall in the same book, that in a healthy educational system both should work together. If teachers understand how test works, they will be more effective preparing their students to the examination. On the other hand, as an Alderson 1999 remarked, testing is too important to be left to testers. It is essential that educational tests should reflect on the curriculum that the needs and interests of learners. Teachers are familiar with the learners and with the reality of how the curriculum is delivered in practice. They are, therefore, well placed to judge a content of test and to hold the test to a marker account.